All right, hello, this is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And today, Tuesday, February 20th, 2018, I gave the class a second pretest which was on a guessing game, and then we went over Chapter 6. Unfortunately, I can't find where I saved the Chapter 6 lecture, so I am going to redo it right now. We started out by going over and talking about, I guess it's Chapter 5 lecture. We started out by going over what Part 2 of the book is about. Chapter 5, which I'm about to go over right now, is about different layouts and some of the major tools, widgets, controls that you will use in Android. Chapter 6 discusses handling events associated with those widgets. Chapter 7 is controlling the appearance of the app, talking about styles and preferences. You style widgets, and if you put a bunch of styles together for different widgets, you create a theme. Chapter 8, we talk about menus and preferences. In Chapter 9, we will deal with fragments. They will continue on talking about the tip calculator, but I'm probably not going to go over a lot of that. All right, so layouts and widgets. I spent a lot of the period going over the second or the page on the right. I'm suggesting that, have suggested up until this point, that we talk about the relative layout and you use that because it's fairly simple to use. It was also, as mentioned, what was discussed in Chapter 3. Widgets are laid out relative to one another. It's a fairly simplistic interface, but it has its problems. Sometimes it's hard to get things exactly where you want them to go, and once in a while different things can happen. So there's other layouts. There's a linear layout, which lays out widgets in a vertical or horizontal line. We'll talk about that in just a couple minutes. There's a table layout that lays out widgets in a table. In other words, it's rows and columns. There's a frame layout. We'll talk about that a little bit later, where one widget is displayed on top of the other. And there's a couple others. Absolute layout, which was deprecated back in Android 1.5. It is not discussed in this book. And the grid layout, which again is introduced in API 14, not supported by older versions, and again is not covered in the book. Now, there are here, if I counted correctly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I think I said in class there were 16 widgets there. The first three, the text view, the edit text, and the button, we have dealt with in our programs, in our Android programs so far. Now, in combination of all the other classes that you've had, the HTML class, the C# class, the ASP.NET class, we've dealt with checkboxes, we've dealt with radio buttons, we've dealt with spinners, which we pretty much have called drop-down lists. We've dealt with progress bars. We've dealt with seek bars. We've dealt with rating bars. We played around extensively with different images. I don't know if we've ever really done much with an image button, but we've looked at date pickers and the different varieties. So we've talked about a lot of those. And as you can see on the picture here, all of this stuff, for lack of better words, all of this stuff kind of ends up being an offshoot of view. And you'll notice with view here, there's view group, and view group has the frame layout, so it's got all your layouts. All right, your frame layout has got all this stuff, your linear layout has got all this stuff, etc. Then you've got text views, and text views hold edit text, buttons, and check text views, which have this stuff. Then you've got progress bars, which have an ABS seek bar and these two, and an image. The point is there is a big hierarchy here, and at the head of it, the top of it, the main head honcho, whatever you want to call it, is view. So, linear layout. Here's a linear layout with a vertical orientation and two buttons, and you notice it's greedy. It takes up all the room that it can possibly take up. Now, I mentioned in class today, and I'm going to say it again, right here. right now that the way that you learn how to use this stuff isn't by listening to me go on and on about it. It's by starting up creating a fairly simple Android app, putting a bunch of controls on it, and then playing with it. So you could play, and you could basically replicate this, where you've got two buttons. And you'll notice with buttons, you can have orientation, which controls whether the buttons are horizontal like this or whether they're vertical like this. All right. You can check the weight. When you do the weight, as it says right here, with no weight, basically it takes up about a third of your screen right here. When you have equal weight, they each take up 50%. Now, if you wanted the first one to take up about 2/3 and the second one about a 1/3, you would put a weight of this one as 1 and a weight of that one as 0. You can also work with gravity, and you notice that we've got here where we've got our buttons centered horizontally. There's a lot of ways that you can set the gravity. Table layouts, we've dealt with tables before. Now it's a little different than what I talked about at the it's a little different than what I talked about in HTML times, where we said we shouldn't use tables, or we should use them very limited. Sometimes you might want to use a table for an Android app. Why? Because you can lay out things in rows and columns. You'll notice here there's a layout span, whereas in the past we've dealt with what? We've dealt with row span and col span, where something can span more than one row or more than one column. Here we've got the bill amount, which looks to me like it's 1, 2, 3. It's spanning 3 columns. All right. So there's a lot of different ways this stuff can be used. But again, with a table, as you'd guess, it's a row and columnar format. A frame layout, the example they give right here, back in the day when we were talking about HTML, we talked about and dealt with things like a z-index, where the higher the number on the z-index, the more toward the foreground it would be, and the smaller the z-index number, the more in the background it could be. Well, here, it's sort of the same kind of an idea, except what you notice is the first control that is put here is the image view, and the second control is the text view. So since the text view comes after the image view, it's overlaid over the image view. You can see it a lot nicer because it's white. One thing I mentioned in class today, and it bears repeating, and that is I have to make sure by March 9th, which I believe is your last day before our spring break, that I come up and I've got a list of what I'm going to be expecting from this Android app that you have to create on your own. But one of the things is, something as simple as if you do something like this, you should use white text so that it stands out. If you used dark text here, or even worse, like an orangish text, it would just fade in. You wouldn't even be able to see it. So much of what I'm going to put in here, as far as what I'm looking for in your app, you'll look at it, you'll read through it, and you might think, well, that's just common sense. That's good if you think that's what it is. You can also nest layouts, where you put layouts inside of other layouts. Notice here what we have is we've got a linear layout that starts here and it ends down here. And inside, each row is in their own linear layout. So you can nest one layout within another. And it doesn't have to just be, so we could have had a relative layout within a linear layout, within a table layout, etc. But as the author mentions here, if you nested too many levels, or too many multiple levels, it can degrade performance, which means that it can take more time for the app to run. And you can have an app that looks beautiful but runs poorly and people don't use it. You can have an app that looks ugly but is functional and does the job that people will use a lot. I've mentioned this before to you, and I'm just going to say it one more time. This is something we covered a while back. You can go out. There's a website that's called webpagethatsuck.com. So there's enough stuff out there that's really poorly written. All right. But even if it's an ugly page, all right, even if it's an unbelievably ugly page, 12 worst over the top, well, it's all right. So this is what they have here. Is it that bad? I don't know. But whether it is or not, if it does the job and if it gets the point across, it's much better than a beautiful site where people look at it and don't even know what the heck you're trying to do with it. All right. When you want to provide a landscape layout, you could go into your manifest file, Android manifest.xml, and set something like this. Or if you want to, you can come in and create your own under the res folder. You can have a layout land folder, and you can put just a layout file for landscape. And one thing I mentioned in class today, again, bears repeating. Here, in fact, I didn't even change it. If I come back over to here, I can go to portrait. Now this really and truly, don't get me wrong, I'm not going nuts over it, but it's not a bad looking interface right here. On the other hand, if I take just this interface the way it is right now, and I click and I go into landscape, that doesn't look nearly as nice. It looks like it's way pushed over to the left and there's a lot of room on the right, although the main heading is still centered. All right, so there are different ways that you can account for having a different layout versus a portrait XML. Sometimes you might want to allow one and not allow the other for whatever reason. Case in point, a lot of games allow for a landscape orientation, but not a portrait. All right, editable text views, which we've dealt with. There's an example of a password. There's an example of an email. So you can see this is type text email, type text password. If you left the @ off of there, you'd get an error message. So there is a certain amount of validation that is built into that. As far as attributes here, as they mentioned, for an edit text, there is an input type and there's a number of lines. We did deal with the number of lines before we set it to 3 for the BMI program. As far as the input type, I had problems with this afternoon. Let's see if we can get it to show now. Maybe not. So if I click on here on our edit text, input type right there, number. All right. Whoops. All right, here are some of the common values for an input type. Again, before going and reinventing the wheel, if I know that I'm going to be working on an app that should hold any type of number, well, number would be a natural value to put in there then. So as mentioned, an editable text box lets the user enter text with a keyboard. It's also known as a text field or text box. Checkboxes, which we've dealt with before. All right, allow something to be checked or unchecked. If you want to make sure that it starts out as checked, you can set check to true in the XML. The things that you'd use most often with it would be the set checked, and here's an example, and the is checked, and here's an example. So the checkbox, as mentioned on the bottom here of page 173, allows the user to check and uncheck options. Radio buttons, in many ways, are similar. Radio buttons are typically grouped, all right, and only one can be active at a time. Sometimes you might want to use a vertical orientation like this. Quite often today you see a horizontal orientation like this. They're both doing the same thing. And again, it just depends on what you're doing and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to do with it. So as mentioned here, a radio button lets the user select one option of several options. Selecting one radio button automatically deselects all the other ones in the same group. Spinners, as mentioned before, We know them more as a drop-down list. They can be a way to not take up real estate on a page when it doesn't need to be taken up. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4 possibilities here. No splitting the bill 2-way, 3-way, and 4-way. Again, a spinner is also known as a drop-down list. And when you set it up, you use what's called an array adapter. You notice this is the first time we're dealing with arrays in the world of Android. But it won't be the last. So as it says, you can create this array adapter, you can set the layout, and there's other things that you can do here. Notice things like return the value or the position of what it is you're looking for, or return the actual item itself of what you're looking for. As mentioned here, you can use built-in Android resources to specify the layouts for the spinner and the items in the drop-down list of the spinner. A seek bar is meant for you to use your thumb or your index finger to move something from left to right or right to left. There's an example right here. What I'm hoping to do is eventually go back to the guessing game program and implement it and add things like checkboxes, radio buttons, a seek bar, etc. By default, when you set this up, the minimum is 0, the maximum is 100, but you can change those as you need to. You can look at the progress to see where you are at any one time. You can set the progress. You can get the progress. So as mentioned, the seek bar lets the user specify a value by dragging. Typically, it'll be your thumb to the left or to the right. Images we saw before. The big thing with images, the big thing here is that you typically will need to create 4 different directories if you want to be able to use the same image and use the same image on different devices. All right? You'll typically want a medium density pixel, a high density pixel, an extra high density pixel, etc. Now, Android supports PNGs, JPEGs, and GIFs. Here they are. Low density, medium, high, and extra high. In order to learn more about this, you might want to go out and look here under Android Asset Studio. I think it's the studio. It says here it's a collection of tools that easily generate assets such as launcher icons for your Android app. You are able to show and to hide different widgets. Notice here, split the bill 3 ways. It's got all this stuff. So it's got per person. But when you say you don't want to split the bill, you've got more real estate because you don't have that particular field in there. As mentioned again, you can use Java code to dynamically show view.visible or hide view.gone different widgets. You can add scroll bars. All right. In most cases, it says you only need to provide a vertical scroll bar. You should never, ever make the user swipe to go to the right. Swiping down isn't a bad thing, but swiping to the right typically doesn't work very well. All right, it can confuse the user. Now, that is pretty much it. What we will do tomorrow then is we will take the test. All right. Then on Thursday, the plan right now is to go through Chapter 6, which is on events. And ideally also to go into Chapter 7, which is on themes and styles. Not real long, all right? And then on Friday to go through Chapter 8. Which is on menus and preferences. And then finally, to go through Chapter 9. And Chapter 9 is on, is that on fragments, I believe? Yes. All right. That's the plan for the rest of the week. It won't take the entire period on Thursday to go through 2 chapters. It won't take the entire period Friday to go through 2 chapters. We'll work around this stuff. All right. And again, as we go on in here, hopefully, we'll have time to write a few more apps. I have been talking about writing having us write the rock, paper, scissors, and maybe there'll be another one also. Again, I'm not probably going to spend a whole boatload of time going through all the changes that they have made to the tip calculator. I don't see the value in doing that. There's nothing wrong with doing it, but I believe our time could be spent in better ways. Okay, so that's about it.
What is the #1 civil